Matt Mackowiak, GOP political strategist, also has a podcast, Mac on Politics. Hey, Matt, what's going on?
Hey, Chad, how are you?
Doing well. Thanks for joining us today on the show. Let's start off with the Texas Legislature because things are really starting to heat up down in Austin. Tomorrow, the bathroom bill will get a hearing, and it'll get kicked around, and I expect it to be one of those all-day type hearings. What is your sense on this bathroom bill? Obviously it has an easier path out of the Senate. I don't even know if it has a path in the House. What are we looking at here in the state of Texas with this SB 6 bill?
Yeah, and the Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina is in Austin today for a press conference with the Lieutenant Governor of Texas, Dan Patrick, at 10:30 Central Time to talk about the differences between the bill and I think perhaps just kind of to clear up some confusion that may be out there. But yes, I think the presumption is that there is support in the Senate for it to go through. We'll have to see when it gets to the Senate floor what amendments come up, what exactly happens. But my guess is it'll pass on a party line vote in the Senate. Look, based on the public comments of the Speaker, Joe Strauss, and others, it does not appear that there's support for the privacy bill in the House. But that's really hard to say, though, because I think ultimately the Speaker is probably not going to allow it to come to a floor vote. You know, if it did get a floor vote, you only need 76 people to pass it in the Texas House, and my guess is you might have that many that could perhaps vote for it. I mean, the privacy bill is very popular among Republican primary voters. In fact, I think it's probably reasonably popular among voters across the state. But the House, particularly the House leadership, is very concerned about the economic cost to this bill in terms of protests and entertainment and things like that. There may be a way to scale it back and make it end up only affecting public schools, high school and below, because I think the Lieutenant Governor is really just concerned primarily about boys and girls showering together and using locker rooms together. So there may be a way for a compromise. I know the Lieutenant Governor is very much focused on this and very much invested in this. The House, not so much. So this is one of many issues where the House and Senate do not see eye to eye.
Is this something that House leadership and the Texas Association of Business, is this something that they should be concerned about? Because when you look at, all these concerts that pulled out of Charlotte, North Carolina, it's easy to pull out of one city or maybe out of two cities. When you look at Texas and you've got Dallas, Houston, Austin, San Antonio, and then, Lubbock, Texas. And there are just so many places that people could go and do go to play a concert. You're talking about these artists losing a heck of a lot more money than they would out of North Carolina.
Yeah, I think it's probably an empty threat. I don't see how you can avoid the second largest state in the country, the economic, engine of the country. And keep in mind, I mean, there's a lot of Hollywood people that are weighing in on this bill who haven't read it, who don't know that it's far more narrow than the North Carolina bill, that in fact most stadiums are exempt from this law. So, the facts here do matter. And some of the economic studies that have been put out there really have been shown to be quite ridiculous and inaccurate. I don't think the economic impact would be that significant, but that is something legislators would have to consider, obviously. So do I think it should happen? I mean, look, it's a good question. I generally think that the state of Texas, felt a need to take this step because of what the Obama administration did with their executive order. And so when that was rescinded by the Trump administration, it said, look, this is a state issue. And so I think Lieutenant Governor is standing up saying, okay, it's a state issue. Let's have the state of Texas determine what its policy is going to be. So I think as it relates to schools, that makes a lot of sense. But we'll see where it goes from here. This is going to be one of 3 or 4 issues that's going to be pretty contentious going down right to the end of the legislative session.
The relationship between the Senate and the House and the Lieutenant Governor and the House, it's something that our friend Patrick Svitek wrote about. I know you highlighted that in today's morning email of mustreadtexas.com. What is that relationship? Do you think that we're going to see even larger divides between the Senate and the House in this session, and maybe people calling each other out more than what we've seen in the past?
Yeah, my guess is this is going to get a whole lot worse before it gets better. There's always tension between the House and the Senate. They're different bodies. They have, different leaders. They have different areas that they focus on, different priorities. But there does seem to be a pretty wide chasm between the two bodies right now. You look at the Senate, they've moved all 4 of the governor's emergency items. Several of them they moved before the House even appointed committees. The House did move CPS reform, Child Protective Services reform last week, and they continue to start, making some progress. But the Senate has really put a lot of these issues over to the House. And so I think they are going to be far apart. My guess is the Sanctuary Cities bill will be different in the House than it was in the Senate. They're obviously very, very far apart on the budget. They're extremely far apart on school choice, where the House Public Education Chairman Dan Humerty said school choice is dead in the House last week. Of course, that got a lot of attention. Yeah. So there's some pretty fundamental differences between the two bodies. The Senate is passing a lot of conservative legislation, and we'll have to see if the House ultimately does the same. This remains a pretty conservative state. Why we continue to have problems passing conservative legislation in the Texas House, I think, is a legitimate question people need to ask.
All right, let's take a look at Trump. He made a little bit of news over the weekend. He's going to make even more news today when he rolls out the new travel ban. When it comes to the wiretapping deal, what do you think the president needs to do? Does he need to quiet down on this, or does he need to release information that he has? What does he need to do moving forward?
Yeah, yet again, he is imprecise with language, and it causes problems. We know that within the system, the President of the United States does not issue FISA warrants through the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. That's done through the Justice Department. That said, there has been reporting, including from the New York Times and BBC and other places, that there had been some level of surveillance on foreign contacts into the United States, including in places like the Trump Tower, and not just since the election, but even before the election. So, I do think there are reasonable questions to ask. If the Attorney General, Obama's Attorney General Loretta Lynch, ordered or requested this FISA warrant, it's entirely possible that there might have been conversations between the President of the United States, Barack Obama, and his Attorney General. It's
you would think
possible.
So, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you would think so.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And also the thing I really wonder about is if there are transcripts of some of these conversations, who were those transcripts shared with? Were they shared with Clinton campaign officials? Were they shared with officials in the Obama White House? Honestly, I think these are reasonable questions to ask. Now, look, I do think President Trump should have been either more specific with his language, or he should have provided some evidence. Keep in mind, the President of the United States can declassify anything he wants at any time he wants. So if that's what he wants to do, make that kind of charge, which is an aggressive charge, he probably should have declassified some information and put it out there in a much more thorough way than just a 140-character tweet at 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning. So, again, I think there's a lot more, obviously, to this Russia story. We're going to learn more about it. The FBI has been investigating since before the election. The House and Senate Intelligence Committees are both investigating as well. I think the Trump team has a reasonable point. If you're going to investigate us, let's also investigate what type of surveillance was happening at Trump Tower, because if the Obama administration was ordering surveillance on the Republican nominee for president, that would be a huge scandal. And I think there are some questions there that need to get answered.
Matt Mackowiak, GOP strategist, tell us what you have on Mac on Politics, your podcast, and also how people can sign up for your newsletter.
Yeah, our new 14th episode of our Mac on Politics podcast posted late last night. It's with the nationally recognized Obamacare expert Ovik Roy. It's a 45-minute conversation about Obamacare. Obviously, that's going to get a lot of attention this week, so it's a great way to get smart on that important issue and the policy choices facing the Trump White House and the Republicans. 4,000 Texans received the Must Read Texas morning email. I know Chad receives it, lots of other good people. If you want to sign up and get that delivered to your inbox, you can do so at mustreadtexas.com.
All right, folks, follow Matt on Twitter, Matt Mackowiak. Appreciate you coming on the show as always. We'll talk to you next week.
Have a great week, Chad. Take care.
You too. That's Matt Mackowiak. Follow him on Twitter at Matt Mackowiak.